Today I'm joined in the studio by Colonel Max Walker of the Royal Irish Regiment. I'm going to ask Colonel Walker a few questions. Colonel Walker, you have just returned from Afghanistan after serving there for almost one whole year. Can you give us some idea of what day-to-day life is like for the soldiers serving out there?
Good morning, Megan. I think overall the situation for soldiers is very varied across the country. The general trend is that we have moved away from what we would call in the army warfighting to training and developing. And what that means is that the bulk of soldiers who are deployed in Afghanistan now are focused on training, advising and assisting the Afghan National Security Forces, so that's both their army and their police, to develop. And the key there is that the Afghans are then able to take on and develop their own security. So in terms of a soldier's experience, it'll be very varied. But I think in general it's less now involved in combat and more involved in training and development. For me personally, a routine day would involve getting up at just before 5 in the morning, and then we would do what we called our patrol preparation, which means that we get our briefings, and then we would set off to the headquarters, the Afghan National Army headquarters that we worked in, which is about a 20-minute drive across Kabul to get to those headquarters. When we got there, then we would spend the day working alongside our Afghan colleagues, attending briefings, conducting planning, and monitoring how operations were going across the country, before then returning to our to the NATO base that we worked in. And then the afternoon would be spent doing a bit of physical training, catching up on office work and boring stuff like that. And then we'd finish about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Always aim to get about 6 hours sleep in the day to keep you fresh. The only exception to that was Friday, or the Afghans called it Juma, their holy day. And because the Afghans had a day off on Friday, then it meant for me and my team of about 100 German and American soldiers and officers that we had a little bit of an easier day. So we're in a slower routine. It meant that we could have a lie-in to 7:30 in the morning as opposed to getting up at 5. And we had a little bit more time to look after ourselves, do our washing and that sort of stuff. So that's what it was like for me, but it's very different depending on what job you're doing across Afghanistan. But as I said, moved away from the fighting and now more focused on developing Afghan National Security Forces.
It must be difficult being away from your wife and children for such a long time. How do you and your family cope with the separation during your deployment?
Well, it's extremely difficult. I've spent around 2 years away in Afghanistan out of the last 2.5 years. The way I view it is it's much more difficult for Caroline and the family because Caroline has a much harder job. She's doing her own job, running a house and looking after 3 children, and doing all the routine stuff that's required to keep that going, and with I suppose in the back of the mind the level of stress that one has with me being away in Afghanistan. Whereas for me, I was out there, I had only one job to do. I had somebody to do my washing, somebody who did the shopping, who fed me and looked after me. So all I had to do was do my job. So from my perspective, being on operations and being away, it's very simple and therefore very straightforward. The only thing I have is obviously the loss that one feels from not being with wife and family and seeing the children grow up, and that is difficult. But when you've got a great team at home, as I have with Caroline and the children, it makes my job being away that much easier. And she does a fantastic job of looking after the children and making sure that they are great. And children do, I think, adapt to the situation and are fairly robust and do adapt to their father being away on operations over extended periods of time. But ultimately, for me, I had the easier of the 2 tasks, and it was Caroline that did, as we say in the army, all the heavy lifting and did the difficult job.
People often think of soldiers like yourself as heroes. What do you think makes someone a hero?
Well, I don't consider myself a hero. I'm a volunteer. I volunteered to do the job that I did, that I do. I enjoy and expect to deploy in operations wherever the government decides to send us. and for me that's what being in the army is all about, doing our job on operations that we train and prepare for. In terms of what I think those people who are around me, who I consider heroes to be, I think they're people who are prepared to make significant self-sacrifice, knowing the consequences of what that self-sacrifice might mean, whether that's in a dangerous situation or in a difficult situation. Now, in many cases in the army, that's in a dangerous situation. So those people that I have in my mind, the self-sacrifice that they are prepared to make and they are aware of in the back of their mind when they make that decision, is that they are prepared to give their lives ultimately for the good of their team, the people around them, their unit, or the mission. So those people are true heroes because they take that action, they knowingly take that action, understanding that ultimately they may have to sacrifice their life for what they are about to do, but they do it knowingly, they do it willingly. In most cases it's just spontaneous, but for me those are what I consider heroes to be. Now, I also, there's a broader piece to being a hero, and there are many people that do that self-sacrifice thing, that put others before themselves. They do that day in, day out, and for me that is also heroic in terms of what I see as a hero or heroic actions.
Today we are raising much needed funds for a charity that helps injured servicemen and women, known as Help for Heroes. Can you tell us a little about the work they do?
Well, as I touched upon in the assembly this morning, Help for Heroes originated from the situation at Birmingham Hospital. Birmingham Hospital is where all injured personnel who were returning from Afghanistan for treatment were looked after. And I think it's fair to say that in the initial days we weren't quite prepared for those casualties coming back from Afghanistan. And there were a number of issues that were experienced at Birmingham Hospital, both in the care of our wounded soldiers, but also in terms of looking after the families who were turning up at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham to see their wounded loved ones. And from that, a guy called Bryn Parry and his wife, along with support from members, I think, in the British Army, established Help for Heroes. And it was initially focused on resolving some of those issues with regards to the care of our wounded soldiers at the hospital and looking after the needs and the welfare of the families, many of whom had to travel great distances from across the country to go to Birmingham to be with their loved ones as they were receiving treatment. The charity has expanded. It's provided a lot of support to a place called Headley Court. So Headley Court is where the soldier goes routinely after he leaves the hospital for that extended period of care. And again, Help for Heroes have provided a lot of support to Headley Court, both I think in the provision of a swimming pool, a house nearby where families could stay while they are with their loved ones as they recuperate. And it's now expanded really to cover really support to soldiers from almost the moment they arrive back in the United Kingdom right through their recovery and rehabilitation, whether that's into perhaps they leave the army and go on to get a civilian job, or whether it's recovery back into military service. Some of that support is financial, provision of equipment, perhaps prosthetics, perhaps specialised wheelchairs, perhaps adaptation of living accommodation to allow the soldiers to return to their homes. It's things like allowing them to get involved in sport, and we've all seen some of the wonderful pictures from the Invictus Games. We've also seen soldiers compete in Paralympics, and Help for Heroes provide the soldiers with the ability to do that, and it's very therapeutic, and it allows soldiers, I think, recover not just from the physical scars which they've endured, but also some of the mental scars that people endure being in high intensity combat environments. So Help for Heroes, fantastic organisation. They've raised significant amount of money, and they provide that care to our wounded soldiers that they truly deserve because of the sacrifice that they have made for their country.
Thank you.